Hello folks, thanks for joining me once again. I've got an exciting one for you today, or at least it was exciting for me. I used to own a Moto Guzzi V7. I sold it and it's one of the bikes that I really regret having sold. So there is a chance that I may well have built the new one up in my head to an unreasonable expectation. Could it possibly live up to the memory that I have of my V7 and improve upon it with the newfound power that it has?
So I've got two questions from today. One, what difference has the extra capacity made to the bike as far as the power or the way that it feels? And two, does it still live as fondly in my memory or should I have left it there? And I guess the third question, if you want to throw it in, because I've got a Ducati Scrambler at the minute, is how do those two stack up? How do they compare to each other? Do I prefer this to the Scrambler? In some ways probably, but it is quite different, really quite different. Let's have a go. So first question, power, yes, it's noticeable. Definitely noticeable, definitely. You can get more out of it, obviously, because it's very similar to the lump they've got in the V85 TT. But on this bike, I don't know, it feels appropriate. If you live with it longer, would you get bored? Hard to say. Possibly. If all you're doing straight roads, then yeah, maybe. That's where I tend to notice. Just doing city stuff, you know. It doesn't pull away from the lights that fast. But that's always boring shit. It's this that I really want to get out on. Do I miss it? I think I'd have to sit in this saddle for longer to find out. I do miss my V7. It's the bike, or equal I suppose, for the one that I miss the most. But yeah, no, I do miss it. There is nothing quite like this. That's the reason I like it. And I love the look of it. I love the feel of it. I love the comfort and I love the newfound power that they've got as well. But it's carefree, isn't it? Simple pleasures. That's what it's about. Simple pleasures.
Let's start with the specification. That's a good place to begin, so you know what you're dealing with, at least, before we get into the feel of the bike itself. So, starting with probably the most important thing, it is the most important thing, it's the engine. Obviously they've updated it this time around, and it has some new power to be found. So of course, it is a transversal 90-degree V-twin, 2 valve per cylinder and air-cooled. It has a capacity of 853 cc's. It makes 65 horsepower and 73 newton meters of torque. Peak horsepower is found at 6,800 RPM and peak torque is found at 5,000.
Oh, it's telling me to shift up, so it does blink. Okay, so there's your indication then. As you can't hear the bike that much unless you put on some aftermarket exhausts, your indication is the little logo in the middle there will flash, it will blink at you to say, please change. You're not getting the most out of this.
So it has more power to play with than the outgoing V7, but that's not the full story. So yes, alright, if you add the power, then that's great. In theory, it should be faster. However, if you then also raise the weight, which they have done a little bit at least, it didn't feel like a really heavy bike, but it did have a kind of weight to it. And it is only going from memory. I didn't try them back to back, but with the older V7, the V7 Mark II actually is the one that I had, or even the version 3 that came out, I would say this is slightly heavier, or it felt slightly heavier than those. In case you're wondering, they list the new one at 218 kilograms dry or 223 kilograms curb weight. So is it faster than the older versions? Yes. Is it that much faster? Probably not.
I think noticeably, it feels different in the saddle. It feels wider for one. I know that because just wheeling it around when I was pulling out, I could feel that my legs were way further out, which meant that I was proper waddling, and that's always a compromise. You want it to be tall if you're doing longer distance, but if you pull up and you're not 100% confident you can hold the weight, you probably want it to be a little bit lower, so it's always a bit of a trade-off really. The way to get around that is to narrow the seat in. This one is a really fat seat, but again that's a trade-off because it should, in theory, mean that it's slightly more comfortable. And yeah, I'd say that it is. It's quite firm actually as well.
It has a seat height of 780 millimeters. If you're over about 6 foot, that might start to feel cramped. If you're anything my height or under, you're gonna probably appreciate that because you can very easily flat foot. The one thing I would say about that is that it's actually got quite a wide seat as well. The seat is very comfortable, obviously, but it also means that it pushes your legs out, so it makes it slightly harder when you're waddling around parking up. You've then got fairly basic braking and suspension. You have non-adjustability on the front suspension, only for preload on the rear. You probably wouldn't expect anything more advanced than that. You have a single 320mm disc on the front, a 4-piston Brembo caliper, a 260mm disc on the rear, and a 2-piston caliper. You don't get much in the way of electronic aids. You do obviously get ABS as standard and traction control, although on a bike with this kind of power, that very rarely comes into play. And if you want to pick one of these up for yourself, brand new, they're coming in around £8,000. You have the V7 Stone for £8,000, or just shy of. You've got the Centenario, which I think is 8,500. No, 8,200 at the minute. That'll probably change in the future, I'm sure. And then you've got the Special as well, which is the chromed out version. It just looks slightly different. All of the performance is going to be exactly the same. It's just slightly more expensive because it's got some fancier items on it. And maybe it looks nicer to the eye, certainly more classical than the Stone.
One of the things I miss about mine, the style, the fact that I just loved getting out on it, the fact that I was proud that it was mine as well, that everyone else seemed to like it. If you like your cafe races, if you're drawn towards them, and you're drawn towards cruisers, and I'd say that's where it intersects really. So if you like the idea of an old school cruiser, something like a Harley, but you cannot bear the fact that you can't lean it down into a corner, I think that's where it fit for me. And I had a friend actually, Simon, shout out, not that he'll watch this, but he is a Harley man through and through, loves his Sportster, but when he got the chance to ride mine or just sit on it, it's the bike that he said he would at least consider over a Harley, which I think says a lot.
What do you know? That didn't take too long at all, but then it's a really basic bike. Sounds like an insult. It really isn't. I love the fact that this is just turn a key and go. You'll probably have different tastes, I'm sure, but I love a basic motorcycle, something that is characterful and it feels legitimately old school. One of the things I was slightly worried about, obviously with any new revisal, is do they lose any of that charm or character? But I'm happy to say it still retains all of that charm and charisma. It still retains a lot of the shake, which I'd heard they'd managed to dial down slightly. It doesn't feel like it's dialed down all that much, and it still has that lovely shake when you turn it on and just roll the throttle, and it just ever so slightly leans over to one side. It's really cool, and you just know that there is something underneath there working. You can feel it. It doesn't feel vibey when you're on the road. There's a little bit at times through your foot pegs, but other than that, it's seamlessly smooth.
Ah, there's that shake. You meet a fork in the road, I gotta say, I want to head right. It's got a really nice little pop to it when you change gears. It's like it's locked into place.
So did it make me miss my V7 as much as I thought it would? Probably a little bit less, if I'm honest, but then it's always difficult when you build something up like this. But yeah, it retained a lot of that charm and character. Has the power made enough of a difference? I think just enough of a difference. If I'm being picky, probably would like just a smidge more, just a tiny bit more. And I know it could do it because of course they've got that in the V85 as well. So it's in there somewhere. They just haven't chosen to on this occasion, but then they have kept it slightly lower. That's a slightly revier engine, I think. So it has more performance to be found. Maybe that's a slight shame, but not a huge one. Not a deal breaker, definitely. And then the big question, would I change the Ducati Scrambler for it? Did I change the Ducati Scrambler for it? No, I've already told you it's still sat outside, bloody thing. Probably just won't start the next time I go to it because it's been listening to this the whole time. I personally prefer the V7, and if I was buying brand spanking new, I would buy the V7 because they're roughly the same sort of price. £8,000 for the V7. This Scrambler in the UK, it's above 8,000, so it's slightly more expensive, but not by a huge amount. So just depends what you want, really. If you've got an old one, so mine's worth between about £4,000 and £5,000. Is it worth double the money to go for the V7? Absolutely not. It offers a lot of the same stuff that I've got there. It just feels slightly different. It's more comfortable. Obviously, it's got the shaft drive, which is appealing to me, definitely, because as someone who rides quite a lot, not having that chain maintenance is a big deal. And it is more comfortable for distance, so that is tempting as well. But Tim, you're asking me, what are they like in a straight line? Which one of them is faster in a 0 to 60? Well, I actually did that on the day, and well, in fact, let me show you. Let me show you who's faster.
So, ladies and gents, just in case you wanted to know, for clarification, which one's faster between a V7 850 or a Ducati Scrambler 800? It's a bit lighter, it's a bit revier, it feels maybe a little bit freer as an engine, and obviously it makes more power, so you got to assume in a straight line this is probably quicker than the V7. It certainly feels a bit more excitable, let's say, and that's part of the problem, is that this does not want to sit still. It's fidgety. So if you catch that section where there's a nice view, the roads open up a little bit, and you're just like, I want to take this in the stride, this bike doesn't really want to. It wants to know what's next. Give me the next corner. Give me the next straightaway. Give me some gravel. Give me something.
Well, I don't think it would surprise anyone that the Scrambler is marginally faster. Even with a ham-fisted moron like myself sat on there, I could definitely have held onto those gears slightly longer on the Ducati. Upon reviewing the footage, I just always feel like I'm abusing the engine slightly, but it was still quicker. But then on paper, obviously it's faster. I think it's about 75 brake horsepower in a Ducati Scrambler, so obviously it's slightly more powerful. It is, as I previously mentioned, slightly lighter as well, so obviously it's going to be quicker in a straight line. But unless you're only doing traffic light to traffic light, that's not the full story, is it? When you're up to speed, when you're going into a corner, you're going to be about the same on either bike, and it really comes down to which one you feel most comfortable on and which one suits your style of riding more. If you feel more comfortable on the V7, then you're probably going to be quicker on it. If you feel more comfortable on the Scrambler, then again you'll probably be faster on that one instead. Basically, if you're out in a pack with other people with similar bikes, let's throw the Kawasaki W800 in there, or the Triumph Bonneville, or even slightly smaller, the Royal Enfield Interceptor. If you all know what you're doing and you're all similar kind of skill set, no one is going to be turning up to the cafe well in advance of the rest of their party. But to bring it back specifically to these two for the comparison, to sum it up in as few words as I possibly can, the Ducati Scrambler is excitable, it's playful, it's wired. The V7 is more mellow, it's more calm, it's more comfortable, but it will get you there just as quick.
If that proves much, I think what it actually proves is that these aren't the kinds of bikes where you're impressed by 0 to 60 figures, and that's not the reason you buy them, own them or ride them. The reason you ride them is so that you can come to somewhere as green and beautiful as this. Compliments to Aylesbury. The day helps, to be honest. Yeah, I'm tempted.
Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe if you want to, and if you want to see a review of my V7 and some of the upgrades I did on that, they'll be flashing around at the very end of this, so feel free to click on those. See you soon. Ta-ra.